Good morning. Nice to be back before you again. My name is Michael Minardi. I am an attorney in the state of Florida. I'm also the chairman of Regulate Florida and also a board member of Normal of Florida and also of the Silver Tour, which is educating seniors on medical marijuana. I want to first clarify some information for you guys. Number one, 88% of the people who start using substances start with alcohol. This has been proven time and time again. Cannabis is no longer the gateway drug. We do not have to worry about our children. In medical states and decriminal states, they have proven that there has been no increase in teen use and actually some decrease in some states as well. The drug war has not done that. Over the 30 years, 40 years of the drug war, it has never decreased use of any substances that are currently illegal. The drug war does not work, and that is proven time and time again. We've spoken a little bit about, and you asked the city attorney for the police department in Tampa about the penalties. It's a $1,000 fine, a year in jail, but also you can lose your license for a minimum of 6 months up to a year. Now this license suspension is what affects people more than anything, because that affects their ability to maintain a livelihood, to go to work, to be a pizza delivery driver, to do anything that associates with driving. Now, unlike DUIs, these people are not allowed to get a hardship license, meaning they can't go in and get a hardship license for work purposes only. So these people with cannabis arrest, misdemeanor, under 20-gram possession charges are losing their licenses and their potential livelihood with these convictions. Now, the discretion, and you spoke about this, but officers have discretion in almost everything that they do on the force. This isn't a different issue for them. Right now with misdemeanor cannabis, under 20 grams, they have the discretion. They can give a notice to appear or they can make an arrest. This is going to be no different. They can still make that same discretion. Instead of a notice to appear, it's a ticket with money as opposed to wasting court time. I am a criminal defense attorney. It's a big part of my practice. I will sit in court for an hour for an under 20-gram case because the courts are flooded with them. We have to resolve that problem. The court system is overburdened with costs. We have cutting costs. Half of the clerk's offices in this state are closed at 4 o'clock, not open some days of the week, and we need to bring that back, and we can do that by changing the laws and decriminalizing cannabis here. No effect on teens' IQ. And the feds, you talked about the federal government, that they have not done anything, but they in fact have. They have passed the Rollbacher Amendment to funding, so technically any state that has legal medical marijuana laws or legalized laws, the federal government is defunded, meaning the Department of Justice, the DEA, cannot spend funds to enforce federal laws in those states. And that has happened, that passed last year, and it has continued to be reaffirmed on the federal level. They have issued the Cole memo, and they have given guidance to states that want to make reform to do that, and there are already 20 states in this country as well that have decriminalized. So please follow their suit.
Woo! Thank you very much. Next.
Hi, I'm Renee Petro, and I'm one of the founders of Cannabis as well. Thank you for having us here today. We are looking for progress, not perfection. This is a statewide and ultimately a federal issue, but Tampa decriminalization is a great stepping stone. This is a great local effort towards common sense legislation and a statement to the changing public opinion that the offense should not be greater than the crime. This decriminalization measure does not include plant extracts, therefore parents trying to help their critically ill children and patients who do not smoke cannabis are still in desperate need of broader and more inclusive statewide laws. We need our family, our friends, and our neighbors, and all of Floridians to vote yes on Amendment 2 in November. I am a parent of a critically ill child who has seizures every day, who hallucinates from his pharmaceuticals every day. And as a parent, it is so hard to watch your child suffer, knowing that cannabis can potentially save their life and give them the best quality of life. Just last night, I had to watch my son hallucinate for 5 hours in my home, okay? Seeing things that are not there. That is unacceptable. That is wrong. Knowing that something could actually help them. We should not be putting people in jail for marijuana. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Good morning, my name is Gary Stone. I am a resident of Pasco County, but on any given day you will find me in Tampa. I am here not as an advocate of recreational marijuana, but as one for medical cannabis, something which is desperately needed by my family and by the family of many of my friends who are here today. My oldest daughter had a history of migraines, which segued a few years ago into seizures. When she sought medical care, they gave her a plethora of 8 medications, which not only reduced her frontal lobe to decrease her IQ by about 60 points, but also gave her auditory hallucinations and gave her an additional diagnosis of bipolar syndrome. When she lost her job, in part because of these symptoms, she was able to get those medications, and in desperation in getting a sample of medical cannabis, she was able to try that. During that time, she stopped having seizures for the first time in many, many years. No migraines, none of the symptoms that occurred whatsoever. She was bright. She was a UCF graduate that I always knew she was, and she was back to work. My wife, who lost her eyesight in part as a genetic disorder that made her retinas detach, lost her eyesight after that to painful glaucoma. Now, she doesn't have her eyesight anymore, but she still has glaucoma, which gives her an immense pain. However, she has found out that use of cannabis does reduce that pain, even though it cannot bring back her eyesight at this time. Now, hypothetically, if I had to go to Tampa to procure this medicine for them to give them relief, and if by chance I had gotten caught with this medicine, I would gladly pay the fine for that first-time fine. Number one, it's still cheaper than the medications they were taking. Number two, I'd be trying to care for their needs. Now, let's be clear. We're here today not because of the fact that there's a failure in the federal government, not the city government or the state government, the failure in the federal government to descheduleize this medication, which was scheduled as one back decades ago because the Deputy Surgeon General didn't find any sign of harm, but because he claimed that there was not enough evidence, even though that was a medication in the medical pharmacopoeia for many years before that. And of course the state, well, they have tried to pass legislation, but they can't implement it. And they're trying to create a 5 nursery monopoly cabal, which is not working because it's so fiercely competitive. So it falls on the laps of this city council to pass an ordinance that will help this compassionate measure. So I ask and pray for the empathy and the intelligence of this council to pass this ordinance for the sake of its residents and its visitors. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Teresa Miller. I spoke a few weeks ago reading the statement from the Hillsborough County Anti-Drug Alliance Board. Today I'm here on a more personal level, and I was only going to speak to the citation, but it's hard for me not to get a little upset about what I've heard. We've come a long way since 1950, I'll agree. Absolutely, we know a lot more about marijuana and the harmful side effects that it causes. There's studies that come out quite frequently that do talk about IQ, that talk about increased addiction, that talk about lung problems, memory issues, which I can't imagine anyone giving someone with any sort of mental health problems marijuana. I'm not real sure where other groups get their data. I use the National Institute of Drug Abuse, SAMHSA, and Monitor Our Future. And I will absolutely assure you that Colorado youth increase has skyrocketed since they legalized marijuana, not only for recreation, but even before that. That being said, I wanted to say, several years ago I went and got my mental health master's degree from USF. And at that time, I saw the real power of prevention. So instead of going and working in the community as a counselor, I decided to stay in prevention. I'm not paid by anyone, and I don't have any agenda other than helping our families understand how substance abuse can ruin their families. In the past 3 years, as I've been speaking out in the community, there's only one person whose child is addicted to a stronger drug than marijuana or has died from opiates or a drug overdose that did not use marijuana or began to use marijuana that led them down the path of addiction. During my internship, I was able to work at some of our local community rehabs and treatment centers, and it was always so inspiring when I could see how education helped these young people see that the path they were choosing was not going to be the one that they really wanted for themselves, and to give them the tools that they needed to go out in their community and say no to using drugs. Many of them were minority students, clients that we had. And speaking of minority clients, I really expected to see all these people and their families who have been in jail and prison because of marijuana here. But who we see here are those that want it legalized, not the pastors whose congregation members have been affected by being put in jail. And when I'm out in the community, and I'm out every day, there's not one day I'm not out talking to somebody about this. When I hand my little card that has educational information on it, just last week, a minister over in St. Pete was so thankful. She has a small congregation over there that she wanted me to come and speak. She goes, this is a tragedy that's killing our families and just destroying them. So lastly, I think the citation is a great idea, but I think we need some really highly structured sanctions in there. First time, they need to go get treatment and be assessed and really find out where they are in their level of use so that they don't go down the path of criminal. So any questions, I'll be glad to answer. Thank you.
Morning, Council. I'm Ellen Snelling, the Board Chair of the Hillsborough County Anti-Drug Alliance, and I appreciate your attention on this issue. And I know you're all very concerned about substance abuse, which is my main concern. I have a family member, my daughter, who's affected by drug abuse, and I have a little different perspective as far as law enforcement and the criminal justice system getting involved. I don't always see this as something negative, and I think sometimes an arrest can put a person on the right path, such as my daughter, who was arrested, and she went to juvenile drug court here in Hillsborough County, and she has received the help she needs, the treatment she needs, and she is drug-free today in recovery. A lot of people here that have spoken so far are really advocating for the legalization of marijuana or medical marijuana. That's up to the state and the federal government to look at those issues, not a city or county. We, in Florida, just to set everything straight, we do have a low THC marijuana law that's for medical purposes. It is now being implemented. I just heard yesterday that the farms are growing the marijuana. It should be available in June. So we already have a product that should be available soon for some of these families that need it. Also, there is a law that's being discussed, or a bill being discussed right now, that would allow full-fledged marijuana, not smoked, but any other type, for families that have a loved one who is in a terminal condition. So that's being discussed now. So there's several things going on at the state level that will help these families. That's not what we're here to talk about today. So what we're here to talk about is the ordinance. And the biggest issue I think the Anti-Drug Alliance has with it is the unlimited citations. Because when you read it, it's like it says 4 or more. So that doesn't make sense. When you're raising a child, you don't say, okay, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. So you want to have a limit, or people are not going to learn the proper behavior. As far as the drug marijuana, it is a drug, it is a harmful drug. It is harmful especially to anyone under the age of 25. The reason being is that is when the brain is developing. It does not finish until age 25. So any kind of a harmful drug that's introduced can damage that developing brain. In marijuana, there's much more evidence coming out showing that it can cause a loss of IQ points, that it can cause changes in the brain that are shown by scans, and of course memory loss, intoxication, poor judgment, poor coordination, all those things. And interestingly enough, it can lead to hallucinations and psychosis, which are some of the symptoms we've heard discussed earlier. So what we would like to do as far as a recommendation is to recommend that a lower amount of marijuana if possible, because 20 grams is 36 to 40 joints, that's a lot. So possibly 10 grams. Civil citation for first offense only would be ideal. To add sanctions, including education, that's primary. The next thing would be an assessment to see if a person needs help, especially if they're under 25 years old. And as far as officers, I think they always should have discretion to arrest if they feel it's necessary. Thank you.
Good morning, Council. My name is Gary White. I am the Associate Director of the Hillsborough County Anti-Drug Alliance, where we work on improving the health outcomes here in Hillsborough County through substance abuse prevention, education, and advocacy. So I thought it appropriate certainly to come and talk with you today. I've heard a good bit today about making choices, and my hope is that the opportunity is taken really to shape the environment in Hillsborough County, certainly in Tampa, where this ordinance will affect. Certainly that will improve the health outcomes. And take that choice really based on research as opposed to anecdotal evidence. When we talk about the research that's, the current research that's out there, Dr. Bertha Madras, Harvard medical faculty, has already talked a lot about the new things that we're finding out about marijuana. And certainly, I'm hoping that we can provide that to you either soon, but if you've not seen it, it does talk about the addictive nature. It does talk about the other consequences that happen in the community when use is up. If you think about it in three major components, we talk about the prevention, where we already do education and programs that are based on either nationally recognized evidence programs and practices. We do that in our schools. We do that in churches. We do that throughout the community. And that covers those education classes, that covers the addictive nature and all the health consequences. The second tier would be the early identification. I was glad to hear about the discussion that was talked about the streets. If you can early identify maybe some of those things that you can probably try to prevent the greater costs down the road. I think that kind of concept is appropriate here, because if you think about the wetness or the availability of marijuana in the community and the effect that it might save you maybe on some court dockets today, but will it save you in the future? And certainly all of us here might not be in this body down the road when really the bill comes due. Another thing is we talk about that early assessment and early intervention. Those things are based on also research. The Substance Abuse for Mental Health and Service Administration offers, and certainly at HCADA we have those kind of programs that we offer for free about screening, brief intervention, and referral to treatment. We have treatment providers here, but it's better if we catch it with the assessment early. That is evidence-based and will give you some good data to tell you whether you need to refer to treatment or not. And I think lastly, I want to just talk about, there's some similarities and comparisons that's been made. I was 9 years old when I asked my dad for a cigarette. He gave it to me willingly, without hesitation. He also had a can of Bud Light, so we talk about alcohol in that comparison. He gave that to me as well. Had my dad been using marijuana, had I asked for it, I certainly believe that he would have given it to me. But does that mean because I asked for it that it was better for me? Certainly not. I spent 21 years in the Army as a nurse, and I'm glad to answer questions if you have any.
Good morning, gentlemen. My message is really quick. We have proof.
Please state your name.
Oh, Hector Valdez. I live in the Floresville area. We have proof that prohibition does not work. Therefore, we have to stop jailing people over this illegal vegetation. I support the citation program, and it will help with that. We also have to keep in mind that every time someone is getting arrested for a small possession, their lives are getting ruined. They can't get a job, their records are tainted, and that affects their lives. And that's just plain wrong. The citation program is not going to make things any more legal. It's just going to give the officer the option of not having to put somebody in jail and ruining their lives over a victimless crime. Now, I understand the concerns about our children. I have 3 kids myself. And what we do is we speak to them about drugs, the abuses, and the harmful effects of it. But I think that's the only way that we keep our kids off drugs, is by the parents being involved in their lives and talking to them. And that way, when somebody comes to them and says, hey, you want to try this? They say, no, thank you. My parents already spoke to me about that. That's the only way that intervention will work. For putting people in jail over an illegal vegetation and a victimless crime is completely wrong. Thank you.
My name is Ned Sudak. Live here in Tampa. I split time between California and Florida. I'm a medical patient. This is my medical ID for cannabis. I'm also a cannabis consultant from California to Washington State. Just want to take a step back here real quick before we go into this. We started today's meeting with a prayer. And at the end of that prayer, the name Jesus Christ was invoked. So that means you guys kind of use the Bible as a stepping stone. So I just kind of want to look at a quick passage from the book of Genesis chapter 1, verse 29. Paraphrase, I give to you every seed-bearing plant on the face of this earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it, they will be yours for food. Going back to, or just coming from where we are, everybody here has pretty much stated that the current system is costing taxpayers a lot of money. The citation program will definitely save people money, taxpayers money. What some of the anti-drug policy people have spoken here today, majority of what they said I do not agree with. However, I do agree with the statements that we are trying to get to full legalization for medical and recreational. With that said, looking at, you guys have stated that federal laws, we don't have the power to change that. We're not trying to change in that sense. If you look at the capital city of our country, Washington, D.C., it's legal. You can go to they've just recently started where you can go in and purchase retail cannabis. We're not going to get to that point here yet, but if we are to be leaders, the city of Tampa is to be leaders in this great state, we need to lead, to continue to do that. And by issuing the citation program, that will be the first step in doing that. Pretty much that. And one other thing, there's twice now I've heard from the meetings from the anti-drug people, they talk about 36 joints out of 20 grams. I don't know how that's possible. Those are going to be like really, really tiny, tiny joints. So that's probably, just not necessarily the truth. Like they'll sit there and keep telling the same lies that we've been fed for the last 80 years and just keep thinking it to be true. But the fact of the matter is they need to be educated. Cannabis, marijuana, as they say it's a drug. It's not a drug. First and foremost, it's a plant. It was put here on earth by nature. And, it doesn't matter what religion you want to call it, that great spirit, this omnipotent force that created the universe also created that plant. They put it here to be used just like anything else. Lettuce, apples, tomatoes, it's not really much different. I thank you guys for your time, and I hope you will pass the citation bill.
Hello, City Council. My name is Carlos Ramita. I am the Deputy Director of the Central Florida chapter of the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. I have a few points that I want to make to you guys today. I heard our opposition say about the 30 or so joints from the 20 grams, and I just want to make a point that their source for their statistics, the National Institute of Drug Abuse, actually has a program where they give medical marijuana patients cannabis in the mail, federally, and they do this under federal law. And they give 30 joints to these people, and I'm pretty sure that there's a lot less than 20 grams in that container. And I also want to make a point that I'm actually somebody that could have benefited from this ordinance. I'm not a bad guy at all, at least I don't think so. I am actually a bit of an academic. I hold an MBA from Nova Southeastern University, and I actually have 3 bachelor's degrees from the University of South Florida. And I was actually arrested leading an existentialism class on the way to Kentucky Fried Chicken for 1 gram. And I always have to live with that on my record. And you guys have the opportunity to make sure that people who are innocent, who are not doing any sort of violent crime, not really hurting anybody, not even hurting themselves, have a second chance to not have that stain on their record. And I really urge you guys have the opportunity today to be leaders in the state of Florida. Miami-Dade, Broward County, West Palm Beach has already passed ordinances like this. And you guys can show our state government that the people of Florida really want cannabis legislation to change. 58% of our people voted for Amendment 2. So this is what the people want. And I really think you guys should give it to them. And I also want to make another point that I had a friend that actually recently died of cancer who lived in Tampa. And I urged her to check out cannabis therapy for her condition, and she was afraid to. She was afraid to because of these laws. And if these laws were different, my friend might still be here today. So I ask you today, in Stephanie's name, Stephanie Goat's name, to consider changing these laws. Thank you.
Good morning, Council. My name is Dottie Brewer Skipper, and I live in Greenwood, here in Tampa, Florida. And today I do serve on many boards, locally and state and national. But today I'm not here to represent any of those. I also serve as a board member for the Hillsborough County Anti-Drug Alliance, and I will say that the facts that the Alliance has spoken today are facts. They are true. So I really urge you to take that to heart. I am not here representing any board. I am here this morning as a parent of 7 children, a parent who does have a child still as an adult who is an addict. And he started in high school with marijuana. And the clientele that I work with on a professional level as well, many of these girls, boys, men, and women started with their substance abuse and addiction issues with marijuana. And as a parent, my heart goes out to these parents with their precious children who are sick. And our state and our nation they are taking steps with medical marijuana, not the smoked marijuana, with medical marijuana. But this today is not about medical marijuana, it is about the ordinance. So as a parent, I suggest and I encourage that this is about giving our youth and giving our community a second chance. I agree, a first offender to be arrested is not the answer. But I do believe that a first offense to receive a citation with consequences, maybe going to a prevention program such as what the Anti-Drug Alliance has with tobacco offenders for their citations, something of that nature. But to give someone 2, 3, 4 or more chances, it's like being in the store with your child and saying, no, you can't have that cookie. And the child asks over and over and over and over again, and you finally say, okay, you can have the cookie. What is this teaching our children? It's about leadership, and y'all are the leaders here in Tampa. Be the leaders that you are and not succumb to keeping up with the Joneses, for lack of a better word to put it. I don't know if you've ever had a child with substance abuse or addiction issues. I don't know if you've ever had a child who has died from addiction issues. And I never hope you have to experience that. So I suggest to you to please give our youth and our community a second chance with one citation, and one citation only, with a chance to help them go into treatment programming. So thank you very much.